Great. It looks like you guys can hear me. So I'll go ahead and if you guys have any questions, we actually have an instructor in the chat. So he can answer any questions and I'll kind of keep an eye on it as well. So Laquita, can you hang on one second. Can you hear me better? Or is that still can you having a hard time hearing me? So I'll just keep going, and if you guys have any questions in the chat, I'll keep an eye on it, but the instructors are in there as well, so they can kind of help with that. So we'll kind of go for probably a little over 45 minutes and kind of give you a rundown, and feel free to interrupt if you guys have any questions in the meantime. So to start with, I'll kind of give you a little background about myself. So I actually worked in finance for 10 years before starting Origin. And before starting my first company, I started an app pictured there essentially called Gym Surfing, and went on to sell that to ClassPass. And then I actually went to a code school myself and realized that after the class was over, no one from my class actually got a job. And then I went on a couple interviews, and it was super obvious to me why that was, in that the interview process is a much different skill set than the learning how to code process. So are we good on picture and sound? Okay, we'll try and work on picture and sound for those of you that can't hear it. So then following that, I actually started Origin Academy, a Code Academy. It's been almost exactly 3 years. 3 years this Friday, actually. And kind of with the overall point of being very pragmatic about the approach to coding, and that learning how to code is one skill set, getting a job is another. So kind of combining those over the course of a 12 to 16-week period, so that we can make all of our students successful once they even get to the job, and kind of continue to learn how to learn from that point. So there's always a lot of main reasons, 3-4 main reasons that people generally have learned to code, in my experience of interviewing a couple hundred people over the last couple years. And it's generally a lack of finances. Healthcare is one that's kind of tied to that one. A lack of relationships, and a lack of purpose within their career. I would say the finance and the purpose ones are probably the two highest drivers of our students, and why they end up coming to the class is just that they have a cap on their salary, or kind of a ceiling in their current career, as well as a lack of purpose, in that, I think it's the last stat I saw was 80-something% of people hate their job, and don't really feel any purpose of anything that they're working towards. And that all changes when you can kind of create things from scratch for your employer. And, there's a kind of an unlimited ceiling within software itself, which we'll dive into a little deeper in the next 45 minutes. So if you're not familiar with the coding industry itself, it pays pretty well, and hang on one sec, we're working on some of the technical stuff. No, because this will be in the way. So one of the first questions we get is what the average starting salary is. So the average starting salary varies quite a bit. I feel pretty comfortable saying, the average salary this year for our grads is around $58,000, but 45 to 60, depending on your previous experience, I would say is about average for juniors, and then it kind of escalates quickly from there. It's definitely the fastest path to 6 figures of all the careers existing, especially starting with no experience. So I would say around 80% of our students have no existing experience of any kind coming into the course. So you're not alone if you have no idea or don't know anything regarding software itself. The average salary for going more deeper into just the average salary for software engineers, specifically in San Diego alone, is closer to $115,000. So that's kind of roughly again, on average, with the juniors starting out closer to 60,000 the first year. The biggest thing is the demand. Specifically, it's not just a local problem; it's kind of a national problem, in that there will be a million unfilled positions by 2020, and each year, every computer science program and every coding bootcamp actually generates roughly 100,000 graduates. So there's just no way that demand is going to be able to be filled by 2020. In addition to that, it's kind of becoming every single skill set is, or every single position within large companies is having to learn how to code and learning that skill set itself. And so so as you can see from the quote itself, whether it's sales, finance, or operations, everybody's going to have to learn how to code eventually. So getting started right now is, generally a good idea as well. So in terms of the demand itself, hang on, I think people are having a problem with the picture. Oh, okay. Do we have a problem with the picture? Okay. All right. I'll just keep the slides like this because that seems to work better. So the kind of slide I was talking about, where G is going to force all of their employees to actually learn how to code no matter what department that they're going into. So and then I don't know if you're aware or not, but Amazon actually is expanding their offices in San Diego. The rest of this year, they're hiring 200 more with the plan to hire 500 total, as well as Walmart Labs, which just means their e-commerce site is actually based in San Diego as well. So they're actually opening additional jobs here in San Diego recently. So it's something where, large employers are, expanding in a lot of areas, but specifically in San Diego, and kind of the demand I've only personally seen it get worse over the last 3 years from the employer side in terms of a lack of talent overall for them to choose from. So kind of a little bit about Origin Code Academy itself. In kind of what makes us different is we don't hire our instructors from like the previous class. So the code school I went to hired a bunch of, they called them TAs, and had previous students teaching the class. And we just don't do that because I was kind of misled, and it's important to me to have people with at least 2 to 3 years of experience minimum. But in reality, ours on average have much more than that experience within the industry itself, because it's kind of hard to teach best practices if you've never had experience across multiple employers. Our placement rate is something we'll kind of dive into a little deeper, but we're proud of that. That's definitely a differentiator for us. We have a dedicated team member to assist with job placement. And so far this year, he's gotten actually 70% of our students, he's actually gotten the job and created that opportunity for the student and provided them with the interview themselves. So that's his full-time job, is just meet with employers and meet with the students looking for jobs, kind of partner up the two. We have interview prep. There's actually students in the other room right now that are doing whiteboarding. All of our alumni every Wednesday evening do alumni prep night. And so there's, I believe, about 15 of them in there doing whiteboarding right now. So making sure that even after you graduate, your skills don't get soft, or you lose any of that ability while you're kind of looking for a job. The real-time curriculum is something that we've continued to do. The actual curriculum we had 3 years ago when we started is completely different than the one we have now. We kind of adapted to what the employer partners we have are kind of looking for. So I get a lot of questions, more so early on in the 3 years, but not as much now. But do boot camps really work? And so The reason why what we do works is because the supply of developers, specifically in San Diego, just cannot meet the demand that the employers have. So when Amazon says they're moving, 200 to 500 jobs here over the next year or so, we just currently don't have those engineers. And so those engineers are going to have to leave other companies. And then that leaves a big gap in the small and medium-sized businesses in San Diego. And so, I'm sure if you've kind of you've done any research at all kind of on the coding industry at all, there's a lot of similar charts to the one you see in the bottom right here, where it's just like the supply overall just cannot meet the demand. So, and it's not confined to San Diego. This is something that's happening in every city, including San Francisco as well. So one of the biggest things that, I talked about before, and that helps the students be in the best statistical place possible to get a job when they graduate, is the fact that our curriculum is exactly what employers are looking for. And so this was actually from the City of San Diego survey. What programming languages are employers in San Diego looking for? And you'll see that like SQL and JavaScript are the top two things that employers are looking for. And so as a result, that's what our curriculum entails. So we do some JavaScript frameworks as well for those that are technical. We do React and Node. But in general, the JavaScript kind of continues to dominate this particular market, with some of the legacy companies still doing some things in C#. But I would say most of the new projects almost all have to do with using JavaScript and SQL. So I just want to pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions before I move on? I was going to check the chat real quick. All right, I'll keep moving. This is kind of a list of some of the employers that have hired some of our students. So and most of these were actually, we had a job fair last week. Again, I'll kind of touch on that in a minute. One of the things that you can kind of do in part of your research is, if you go to our YouTube channel, we've interviewed a lot of recruiters, investors, CEOs, CTOs, COOs of technology companies, and have a lot of their interviews on our YouTube channel. So I think it'd be really good to kind of give a background for what it is they look for in bootcamp students, and what it is they're looking for, when they're hiring our students in particular. So I think it'd be good if you get a chance to go through some of those videos and kind of get even more background into what is it that employers are actually looking for. Kind of wanted to touch on some of the objections or questions that you might have, but haven't asked. And so one is always, am I smart enough, or do I need to, do I need to be a rocket scientist, or do I need to be good at math? That's a pretty common question. And so the overall, within software development itself, there isn't a lot of math involved, unless you go the data science route, or unless you're working on a product that actually has a lot of math involved, which is pretty rare. So that's something that's kind of surprising for students when they start, is they think there's going to be more math, and there's not. So another one is, I wasn't very good at school. This is, I would say, completely different than a high school or college experience, in that we're very hands-on. So most of the time that you're actually learning, it's by building projects and not by listening to lectures, because your retention rate when you're listening to lectures is, single digit, close to 5% retention. So almost everything you're going to be doing in the classroom is going to be hands-on and building stuff. So it doesn't really matter how you were in school. It matters more what your work ethic's like, and the fact that you're a little more persistent, if I could pick one, and have some perseverance, if I could pick one character quality overall. I've only worked in retail, so we have a lot of people that are very insecure about previous careers, and it doesn't make sense in their head that they could get hired if they work at a store in the mall, for instance. So we had a student who worked at a Skechers in the mall, was super insecure about his previous experience. And then when we were working with our employer partners, there's one up in Encinitas that has a retail store, and wanted to know if we had any students in our class that worked in a retail store, or had previous experience doing it, because they would understand kind of how retail stores work. And if they're building a inventory management system for the business, they would already kind of understand that aspect of the business. We've had somebody who worked at Costco, and they were insecure about that. And then he ended up going to work at a warehousing software company. And they specifically asked, have you ever had anyone work in a warehouse? Because no matter what your previous experience is, there's definitely employers looking for people with that kind of knowledge, because the last thing they want to do is explain to you how a warehouse and warehouse inventory management systems work, and then also teach you kind of how to build it technically. If you already have that built-in experience of, say, like working at a financial company and how financial markets work, then it would make sense that you could go build software within that realm, because then they don't have to teach you all of the industry stuff. So it's not always, we don't always nail exactly what the employer is looking for with your previous experience, but there's literally no background that's going to hinder you from, going and getting a job. Because back to my previous point, they can't find anybody to, kind of get the work done. So if you're an A player, then, they're going to pick you regardless of your background. And so the kind of going back to the I wasn't very good at school, it's more of a learning process of how Edison invented the light bulb, in terms of he failed 999 times before finding something working the 1000th time, rather than and not getting discouraged during that whole time and being like, man, I didn't write any code today. I kind of just failed over and over and over again. I could have just, one of the things I thought when I was in code school was I could have just stayed in bed and gotten just as much code written. But like, you have to continue to keep the mindset that like, now I know 999 things that don't work. And as long as you kind of keep that mindset, that's a lot what the learning how to code feels like. Whereas with the previous learning experiences that you've most likely had, it's more of memorizing a set of data just long enough to pass a test. And then you can kind of forget all about it. So there's not very much critical thinking involved. There's not very much discouragement. It's just kind of like, memorize this info. Here's what's going to be on the test. And coding is nothing like that. The other question I get a lot is who's in our class. So I would say we've had students as young as 18 and students as old as, well, I don't ask, but probably 55, 60, I would say. But the average is 25 to 35. More of people that are kind of sick of their job. They feel like they're never going to make more than, maybe $60,000 to $80,000, in the next 5 to 7 years. And or people that make, into the six figures. But a good example is a timeshare salesman that just, hated her job because she had to work weekends. So this is a career that's kind of, I like to call it kind of a create your own adventure, in that if you want to mail it in and make 80 to 100 the rest of your life, that's a possibility, and you want to do the work-life balance thing. Or if you want to, work 80 to 100 hours a week and go work at Tesla and make an insane amount of money, like that's an option as well. It's just kind of like whatever suits your needs. It's a very flexible career in that you kind of can create your own adventure. And I would say in that same vein, you don't really get the opportunity to create your own adventure until you're about 18 to 24 months into your career. So just to give you guys one of the most common questions I get asked is, how long until I can go work remotely on the beach each day? I would say 18 to 24 months is a good time to, you want to go work for somebody else, kind of get your experience in, have a senior engineer mentor you. And then about 18 to 24 months is probably a good time that's probably a more realistic scenario that you could pull off. And then after that 24-month period of experience, I would say your employer needs you more than you need your employer, which is always kind of a weird feeling for people once they get to experience that for the first time. So I saw there's a question in there about financing. So the financing options are we use Skills Fund. And so a lot of that information is on our site, but essentially they do interest only payments during the first 3 to 4 months while you're still in school. And then the full payments don't actually start until you've graduated. And so we also have another option, which has a higher interest rate where we can guarantee financing for people. And I would say, honestly, probably close to 80, 90% of our students finance. And then I think you have 3 years to pay it off, but most people kind of knock it out in 12 to 14 months after they have kind of moved on from there. Yes. Okay. So in terms of the format of the class, it's 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. each day, and in-person attendance is required. And so I say 12 weeks-ish because if you have some kind of previous experience or you have an insane work ethic, you can knock it out in 12 weeks. If you have no experience, I would say it's more realistic that you're going to finish in about 14 weeks, possibly 16 weeks, but probably closer to 14. And so the first 2/3 of the class is a lot of instruction and projects that you're just kind of working through. And then the last month of the course is kind of a combination of group and final projects where you're building out a project for a company in San Diego, a nonprofit in San Diego, or sometimes students will want to build tools for us at Origin and build something that they wish they had while they were in school that they just kind of create, throw in the App Store for us. So the main objective once you finish that final project is you just want to be able to overcome the objection of you have no experience. And so you need a company or a nonprofit or us at Origin to kind of vouch for, hey, here's the product that they built for us from scratch, and be able to overcome that objection. In rare instances, we let people build their own projects, but we kind of gotten away from that because the goal isn't really to build the next Uber while you're in class. The goal is to get you prepared and put you in the best statistical place to get a job when you graduate. So that's kind of what we're shooting for with the final projects. The prep course is something that we require people do before they start the course itself. So it's around 30 to 40 hours of HTML, CSS, jQuery, and JavaScript fundamentals. And so this will give you a good idea of if you even enjoy coding to begin with. And then on our end, it'll make sure that you kind of hit the ground running when you start the class, so that we can kind of skip over some of the fundamentals and just get straight into the first lesson actually involves algorithms. So it moves pretty quickly once you get into the class. So we'll email you out a link for the prep course, and I think I saw somebody post it in the chat itself, but don't worry if you didn't see it. We'll kind of follow up with you guys on that. The prep course is, if you've never coded before, this is a really good first step to be able to see if you like it. And then we actually offer the instructors free assistance within there via Slack channel. So if you get stuck on anything, you can kind of post in there. So the kind of going through a little more granularly of the course itself and what the 12 weeks, a little more granular looks like, is the first 2 weeks are really just you adjusting to the new learning style that we kind of have already talked about, in that you just want to start creating good habits that are going to make you successful. And we do one-on-ones during the first 2 weeks of the course itself to kind of make sure and check in and see if you have any additional questions. And also we track your time and the amount you spend on coding, so we can kind of give you feedback from the instructors of your pace and how everything's going from our view as well. And so I would say it takes almost like clockwork. It takes 2.5 weeks for people to get to like the comfortable being uncomfortable stage. And so it's almost always by the end of week 3, everybody seems to be like, oh, I get what you're saying now. So it kind of takes about 2.5 weeks to get to the point where you're solving problems and you understand that you're going to get stuck on something for maybe 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes a couple hours, and you're kind of like comfortable with that. You kind of understand how that works, and you have enough like projects and problems that you've solved that you kind of understand how it works at that point, essentially. So you start to get this is when you start to get a little better at Googling and then kind of reading through documentation. And so it's always an interesting thing that, it can be frustrating the first couple times an instructor will tell you to Google it, and then you watch them Google it and kind of learn that it's actually a skill in and of itself that you'll get better at throughout the course, but much more so during your career as you kind of go out and solve problems and find other resources to solve the problems you'll find in your career. But you'll start to read through documentation where, some people like to watch videos, some people like to read documentation. In general, there's probably more documentation that's more accurate than a lot of videos. And you'll start building small projects, calculators, a lot of like mortgage and actual rate calculators. And so you'll start to get a bunch of small wins and start to see, like once you build your first project, then you start to kind of believe that, hey, maybe I can kind of do this, because the projects just get a little bit more complex from there. And then the third stage, weeks 5 to 7, are when you start to work through the projects within the course itself. I like to call it kind of like the meat and potatoes part of the course, where you're just going through as many learning iterations as you possibly can to kind of make all these concepts stick in your brain. And then, each project you build is kind of going to introduce a new technology and or a new tool, so that you can kind of start to go from trying to memorize everything you're supposed to type that you've seen enough times now that it's kind of, cemented in your brain, and you just kind of type it out of habit because you've done it so many times. So this is kind of, I like to call it the fun stage, because about the project we have in there called VSTDA. And then once students start to finish that project, they feel like, after that happens around week 6, then they kind of feel like they're downhill. And from there, they're just kind of constantly problem solving. And now they're in the zone per se of kind of understanding what a career in software looks like, more so than when they start. So then I kind of took you through the final project, and kind of working through that. And then you kind of go into the career search, essentially. So the career search will, at a very minimum, and this isn't really the valuable part we provide, in my opinion, we just help with like LinkedIn, resumes, job boards. I feel like the more helpful portion is the weekly meetings and the job fairs, where we bring employers into our offices themselves. And I think some of you were able to actually come for the job fair and see it in action, which is, the most fun day for us and for the students. And so the job fairs, the format for those is we had 15 employers come in. Students had 30 minutes to talk to whatever employers they wanted. And then the employers wrote down the top 4 students that they wanted to interview for 15 minutes on site that day. And then I believe of those 15 companies, they're reviews this week. So we'll probably get 9 or 10 students from the job fair hired afterwards. And then the weekly meetings for those that didn't get chosen to the job fair, we'll just have weekly meetings with them. And as long as they're putting in the work, we'll continue to like help provide them. Because at this point, we have a pretty steady stream of employer demand. In fact, at the job fair, the 4 of the 15 companies were previous alumni actually doing the interviews themselves. So we've kind of generated our own little ecosystem within the hiring market. And so we just know by looking at, if we look at the amount of applications you've sent out and the number of phone interviews you've had in the last week and the number of in-person interviews, we can just look at that ratio and tell you which part of the process you need to continue to work on, or which part we need to kind of spend time help coaching you on. So, I mean, we've done it long enough. I know exactly what those ratios are supposed to be and kind of which part's broken when it's not being effective and you're not getting any phone interviews or in-person interviews. One of the things I wanted to give you guys examples of for final projects was we had somebody build a cybersecurity project. We had somebody build some technology for that kind of integrated with Fitbit, because they needed an API generated. So we actually had a student build that on their own. We had OfferUp's a real estate company, so they built a tool for realtors. Rock My Run was a chat bot that was, still a part of it's actually a core part of their business now. We built a application for firefighters to be able to log all their incidents for insurance purposes. So we worked with a startup to get that built. And then Sony actually had an internal project for a student they ended up hiring to kind of it was kind of almost like a test. And so she had built that for about a month, and now she works on their PlayStation team. So just to give you an example, the final projects kind of have a wide array of usability, but overall, the biggest thing was being able to build something for an employer and just having that person be able to vouch for you at the end of your journey when they go into the job hunt, essentially. So the in terms of the getting a job afterwards, we kind of work with you again on the job preparation, the interview prep. You'll be doing code tests Monday, Wednesday, Friday while you're in the class. So you'll have gone through that 25 to 30 times as you go through. and then kind of just preparing you for like what day one on the job is going to look like. And then hopefully you come back and guest speak at Origin, because we love when the alumni do that. So the performance fact sheet, which is actually listed on our website, is something that we're super proud of and is on our, again, it's on our website, but the numbers are in 2016, our placement was at 90%, 2017, 81.6, and then 2018, it'll land probably between 85 and 90% again. And again, that just kind of goes to the employer partnerships that we have and kind of the pipeline into the companies that we have existing. The in terms of how we've done, we've gotten it's somewhere in the mid 130 students that we've gotten placed in software companies. There's roughly a little over 40 companies that we've gotten students hired at. Some of those ones that most people have heard of is the probably Facebook, Sony, Universal Music, and HP. That's actually a picture of our grad wall. I think when we had like 109 or something like that, if you actually count them out. So we still kind of have to update that. But even within our physical location, you'll see in your first appointment as you walk in, you'll see the grad wall, just a picture of each grad and then a logo of the company and where they currently work at. So the so in terms of the next steps, the next step, if you have never coded before, is definitely the prep course, which we'll email out after that. If you have already done the prep course and haven't seen the school itself, then you'll want to schedule your first appointment. First appointment is pretty informal in terms of just interviewing you interviewing us type of a deal. And then the second interview is where you're going to meet with a instructor. There's a mandatory part of the prep course that has to be complete if you've never coded at that point. And then the instructors have to sign off on each student that gets into the class. And at that point, we kind of decide if we want to move forward with you and vice versa. And then you'll want to finish the prep course before the class begins. And then September 24th, which is actually next Monday, is our next start date. So we have start dates every 2 weeks because you're kind of all just going at your own pace on site from 9 to 5:30 each day. And then we're actually doing a discount for the, I believe we have 5 people starting on Monday. If you sign up for the 24th or the October 8th cohort. So, make sure you mention that if you are signing up for one of those as you go through this process. So if you guys have any additional questions of things I covered, I'll scroll through the chat real quick. Oh, nice. Some of these got answered, I guess. So, we're actually going to save the webinar and probably send out the replay of it because it looks like some of you got kicked out for some of that and some of the slides didn't show. So we'll go ahead and do that. And the last thing we need to do is we need to give away the Xbox. So we need to do that now. So how we're going to do that is I'm actually going to pull up a random number generator. So give me 1 second. All right. All right. So what I need everybody to do is, everybody that's still on the call, I need you to put, again, what city that you are signed in from. And then I will pick a random number between 1 and however many participants put the city that they're located in. And then that's going to be the person that actually wins the Xbox themselves. So that's how we'll do it. So go ahead and put in your city if you're still on there. And then I'll give you guys about 60 seconds and we'll count how many of you are. And then we'll just count down from that many people, basically. So I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to type in the city that you're in right now. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hector put in his name twice. Nice try. If you put in your name twice, only the first example will count. So, all right. So it looks like I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Okay. So you guys can see my screen between 1 and 7. All right. I'm going to do a test the first time. So the first one does not count. I just want to make sure that it's on. 1 and 8. We got another one. Oh, nice. All right. We're going to do 1 and 9. Okay. So this one's going to be a test. So don't get excited if it's you. Okay. Yeah. So there's okay. So we're gonna start, and just to be clear, we're gonna start. Armando is number 1, Tony's number 2, Mike's number 3, and so on and so forth. So I'm gonna hit generate, and then whoever gets it will win the Xbox. So 4. Who did I just say was 4? One, 2, 3. Hassan, you won the Xbox. So Hassan, I'll follow up via email with you and get your address, and then we'll go ahead and ship the Xbox out to you shortly. So if no one has any additional questions, then that's all I have for now, and we will follow up with the prep work following the call. I don't think anyone has any other questions. So I will ship that. I'll ship that to you, San, and then we'll be good to go. All right. Thanks, guys.